Peter Smith is racking up the frequent flyer miles. He is currently CP at Activision Blizzard Call of Duty League. That is one job he has on the East Coast. Oh, but he goes on the West Coast on the weekends because he works with Fantasy Zone, part of NFL Sunday Tickets, and he does that in Los Angeles. He joins me today. We're going to talk about his story and what makes it inspirational on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. If your career, and knowing you work in video games, but if your career was akin to being in a video game and understanding what it takes to beat a level and go to the next, what was and has been the hardest level or moment in your career to try and beat?
I think, 10 years ago, my mom passed away from stage 4 colon cancer. And I didn't know I was going to talk about this. I went to a really dark place. And I ended up somehow coming out the other side. I'm in recovery now. I've been sober for it'll be 9 years coming up this month. And that turned my complete life around. And made me into, I think I always knew I was good at what I did and what I do, but I feel like this has allowed me to be better at what I do and be a better listener, and just so many things that I never would imagine possible that have happened since then. So it's been a journey. And, I always, James Crittenden, who's my boss at DirecTv, gave me a chance. And I'll never forget it. And, I'm here. A lot of reasons are thanks to him, because he took a chance on me.
How do you continue to live with your mom's legacy?
I try to. It's funny. I was at CBS at the time at the Masters when she passed away. And I just remember this guy, Bob Intelli, who's an operations guy, came up and told me my wife was on the phone, and I knew. And, they kind of got me out of there and got me out, and I couldn't get out of flight out of Augusta because this was just crazy. And, but I think she still does look down on me, but I think she'd just be really proud of the person that I'd become, the father I'd become, the husband I'd become. I think that's what she looked at me the most.
How much of what you do and have done and have overcome is you thinking of her, the strength that she had, and you trying to build upon that strength yourself?
Oh, I mean, pretty much any show that I do, I'll always have a picture of her that I put either in the studio or on my panel with a couple of my kids and stuff too. So she's always with me. So it's just, I always kind of feel her presence, especially when times get tough. Because it's a stressful business, right? Like, it's controlled chaos. And, I've found this kind of power wherever it comes from, where I can kind of harness that. And, not a lot of things, if you ask around, not a lot of things faze me, just because I can kind of get myself really kind of locked in and kind of see different things and be able to kind of I always say, it's like, people always ask me what I do. I'm like, well, I make sure that everything that's supposed to happen happens and kind of keep the train on the tracks. But, it's not easy, and things always go wrong. And it's more like, now to me, it's like, well, things are always going to go wrong. How do we deal with those things when they do go wrong? And I was taught very early on at CBS, like, I raised my hand and said I made a mistake, and, move on, because I don't think that, yelling and all these things that I think that people used to do back at the business, like, those things don't work anymore. But to me, they always made me never want to be like that. And, like, I would say, like, why would I ever yell at somebody for making a mistake in the first quarter of a game? Is that ever going to make somebody have a better game? It certainly didn't make me have a better game. It made me kind of more stressed out. But, I learned from some of the best, and have kind of always tried to take that and use it and keep it going forward, of just trying to treat people with respect, and because I feel like that's the way that I would want to be treated.
Your obvious perspective has changed since the adversity has happened, and how you look at the way in which you approach your job. How about the way in which you treated yourself at those toughest moments? How did you get yourself out of that?
I mean, I just kind of, I really try to take things one day at a time, and I just tried to kind of, get back out there and work towards what I knew that I was good at and try to get back. And I've always tried to be honest. And people ask me, about what happened to me. I tell them if I feel like I'm in a situation where I'm safe, and I don't ever really get into too much of the details. But like if someone asks me, how I got here, then I don't have a problem telling them, because I don't have anything to hide anymore. Like I feel like if you know me, the work that I've done, and the work that I'm capable of, and that that I'm a good person to work with and a really good leader, and I'm a relationships guy and I love people. And I feel like that's kind of sometimes part of my allure, where I know how to talk to people, and I know how to make people, I know how to get the best out of people. My parents were in the restaurant business for a very long time, and I feel like that was one of the things that they always instilled to me, is like, treat your people well, because they want to work harder for you if you do that. And so it's kind of something I've learned from that, in terms of the work ethic and the restaurant business, that I've tried to take into TV and gaming and everything else that I try to do.
In all that you do now, specifically, how has your story positively impacted others around you? You talked about it and how you build up others around you, but from a specific standpoint, you inspiring others, what does that look like, and how you've seen that manifest?
I think I think everyone deserves a second chance. You'll always hear me say that. Um, I think that, you know, uh, like again, like I don't ever know if someone's asked me a question, like I didn't know if we'd get to where we are in this interview, where like that's something that I would talk about. But it's just something like, I was actually talking to somebody about the other day. I was kind of just thinking about this interview, and whether or not, something like this would come up. And I just feel like, you know, if I could help one person, by saying that I'm in recovery and it can be done, then I'm doing my job.
And that's why you're here. And that's why I wanted you to be here, because I knew you had such an inspiring story. I didn't really know anything about your story other than I knew you were inspiring. And so having you come on and share these things, this is beautiful, because it is going to help a lot of people out. Your stop at DirecTV, and then if you look back, like you said, you've worked at CBS, you've worked, you've done PGA golf, you've done stuff Fox and Tennis Channel. But what you also did is you helped out a fifth grade newscast. And when you
The best.
when you did that, how did the true, authentic Peter Smith come out?
It might be the most fun I've ever had. And it just, you get to see, I feel like for me, like once your kids start going to school and growing up, you don't get to see them as much for some reason. This is before COVID, obviously. So like the fact that I would get to go into school and see them a lot, and just like see these kids, and we had people in front of the camera, people behind the camera, like seeing what people were good at. And it was really cool to see. And it was so fulfilling. And like, I wish that they were still kind of doing it. They haven't really done it since, COVID and everything else. But like, it was such a blast. And like, just to see the smile and the kids' faces, and see them be nervous and be like, hey, it's okay. Like, people that do this all the time get nervous. So like, it was really, really cool. Really, really cool.
Coach kids there, and certainly you're around a lot of talent, so you're helping coach and prep talent as well. What is your approach to that, and how your approach to talent, and the way in which you coach them up through things in different segments that you do?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think that's one of the things, like, I think if anybody asks around, like I always try to have a really good relationship with talent. I think it's finding out what they like, what they don't like. And really, like, I think you have to establish a relationship with them. Like, it's so super important. But I'm also one of the, I think I'm the type of producer that, like, I don't ever want to tell you what to say because you're the one that's out there saying it. So like, I always want to kind of you guys come to me with ideas and then we'll make them work. Because again, it's your voice. I don't ever want to put words in somebody's mouth unless it's something really serious that has to happen. But I think there's not always a right answer, and I'm not always right. I'm wrong plenty of times. But to be able to have that dialogue with them of being like, okay, let's figure this out together, and what's going to be the best message that we can put out there as a team. I think that's what I've always tried to do.
Speaking of teams, you and your wife make a good team. How is having her in your corner and the way in which she roots you on in the business, how has that been priceless to you in all that you're doing now?
It means the world to me. Like I was saying to you before, when they moved the fantasy show from New York to LA, my boss, James Crittenden, said, would you come out to do it? And I said, let me ask my wife. Because that's just something I have to do. And she's like, absolutely. And go for it. And like, it's really interesting because again, during football season, especially, and just in general, like I'm on the road a lot. But when I'm home, I'm home. And I feel like even the past 9 years or so, I've really got to be around a lot for my kids growing up and be able to walk them to school and be home for school when they get back. And just something that I think, even though I travel a lot and do a lot of crazy sports and stuff in production, like I'm around a lot. And I think that that's something that I hope that they always remember. But I certainly remember like in those years where, they all of a sudden now my daughter's going to be in high school next year and my other one's going to be in middle school. It's gone so fast, but I hope that, and I think that they will remember, like, my dad was gone on the weekends a lot. But he was around a lot during the week, and that was really cool. I hope for them, but it definitely was cool for me.
When you look at them, what about them do you see the most in them?
My younger one is a soccer player, and I see her like aggressiveness and just she just has no fear in anything that she does. So that really reminds me a lot of me kind of growing up and playing baseball in college and everything, and just being that kind of athlete. And then my other daughter is very, very patient and maybe a little bit more reserved, but really kind of funny. I really think she's more like my wife than she is like me. But she's got some of my qualities, hopefully some of the good ones.
The good qualities that come out when you work with Activision and Call of Duty, what are those? And how have you been able to go from working in sports to also working in sports to supplementing that by taking on the video game space?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was a space that I really didn't know a lot about. And I remember they flew me out to Los Angeles to kind of talk about the job. And I was like, hey, I don't really know anything about Call of Duty, but I know how to produce TV very well in big events. Because initially, before COVID, this was a NFL type model where we were going to different cities, different countries, London and Paris, and being on the road and to be in kind of a road show. But at the end of the day, I look at it, it's just stories. It's personalities. There's some really cool kids in this league, and they have really good stories to tell. And as a storyteller, I don't look at it really any different than I would any other sport that I would do. And yeah, there was a learning curve of learning some of the parts of the game and how it works. But like, again, like I try to surround myself with good people that if I don't know, I don't always know the answer, but I'll have somebody on my team that does, and I can ask them. That's one of the things I always try to do. Like, and to anybody, young out there, I always try to say, like, learn how to do everything, because you never know where you're going to get in a spot where like, hey, I can do that. Oh, really? Get in there and do it. Like, and that's, I kind of got thrown into the fire of this esports thing, but it's been a journey, and we have done some amazing things that I don't even think I knew were possible.
Why didn't you think they were possible, and what made them amazing?
I mean, when this whole thing hit, when COVID hit, I was in Los Angeles at the time. My wife's like, I think you should come home. And, someone put together a presentation for us of like how we were going to do this show in the cloud. And I don't even really know if I knew where the cloud was, but I mean, and we saw this demo and I'm like, this is never going to work. It's never going to work. But these guys at Blizzard have been doing some of this stuff before. And like by the end of, I mean, the first season was obviously hard. I was grateful to be working and we were learning and doing all these things. But like, towards the end of last season, I mean, we were doing shows completely in the cloud before we went back to LAN with nobody in the same location, none of the talent, things that I think people now take for granted in the hybrid kind of space. But I would put some of those shows up against anything that I've done. That's how impressed I was with how the people behind it and how we learned to use the technology and where we finally ended up making it. Like, just blown away. I'm still blown away.
How, in looking at what you have been able to do in that space and being able to adapt, do you even, like, you mentioned how mind blown you've been in seeing what you guys have been able to do from putting these things together. And you also talked about the storytelling aspect of those who you feature. Is there a story from somebody that you've showcased that has hit you the hardest? And if so, what is that?
Oh, God, there's a lot. I mean, I can just think of some moments last year where this guy, Jeremy, we call him Study, is on the Call of Duty desk, and his brother was in the military, and we did a bunch of stuff for some sponsors that were armed forces, and just genuinely, like, they did this amazing feature on him and his brother, and he had lost his mom, and it just straight up, like, on camera, just losing it, like, and then everybody else is losing it, like, just tears from everywhere. And it just was, inspiring, just amazing to see. And it just props to him to being vulnerable enough to be like, hey, we're going to put you on camera after this feature, and really not have any idea how you're going to react. But like, it was amazing.
Amazing, rewarding, and so meaningful. For you, what about what you do, Peter, gives you the most, or provides you with the most meaning to your life? Or brings the most meaning to your life, I should say.
I think I love being part of a team, and building something. And I think even the other day I was thinking about this, like this last year, in a global pandemic, for the Call of Duty, ended up, one of my best friends, who used to work at ESPN, this guy, Rick Angelo, I got to bring him on, and just had this amazing crew that we brought together, and ups and downs, and from doing events online to then doing them back in arenas and culminating at the Galen Center for the Call of Duty Championship. It just made me feel so amazing inside, like walking out of there being done, like, man, we really did an amazing job, and it felt really good. And like, sometimes you walk out of the truck and you're like, yeah, it wasn't the greatest of days, and how can we do better? But out of that weekend, man, I walked away feeling like we really did something special.
Peter Smith is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How about what you did as far as being special during your baseball career? The high of your baseball career would be what?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I think, being able to play baseball outside of high school and college, and kind of toll around the independent leagues or whatever you want to call it, like, you got paid to play baseball, like that, to me, is always an amazing thing to look at. And, I don't think about it too much anymore, because I'm old now, it was 30 years ago, but, it was amazing. It was one of the things that I love to do the most. I still love the Yankees. I don't really watch them as much as I used to now, because just with family and stuff, but like, baseball has always been something to me that it's just a game that I just love. And it's really one of the only sports I've kind of never really done, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I've never really done a lot of baseball. Did a Little League World Series back in the day, but not too much since then.
I have the feeling that you might add on to what you're already doing with that. Peter Smith is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Final question for you, Peter. Someone who we both admire, someone who you work with in Bill Wagner. How awesome is that guy, and how genuine he is, how talented he is, and how inspiring he is.
I mean, listen, I consider Wags a good friend of mine. I think, when I came to DirecTV initially back 2014, he treated me with open arms and was like, how can I help you? Let me know anything that you need for this new show, this new shiny toy that DirecTV was doing after doing Red Zone for so long. And I also got the opportunity to work with him on Dan Patrick for a while. And that was amazing too. And just like, listen, what he's done and the people that he's worked with, like I always look up to him and respect him a ton because he's really good at what he does. And I'm happy to say that I know him.
I'm happy to say I know you, and you're very good at what you do. Peter Smith with Activision Blizzard and with DirecTV with their Fantasy Zone as part of the NFL Sunday Ticket. This was so much fun. I really appreciate you doing this and your openness, your transparency, very inspiring. And I know it's going to positively impact a lot of people, including myself, as someone who I lost my dad when I was a teenager to cancer. So in a way, in a little bit of a way, I have a little bit of an understanding, just a little tiny bit. But Peter, I appreciate you and look up to everything you're doing. And it's really neat to see the way your life has come full circle and beautiful things are happening right now. Peter, I'm Bryan Fenley. Appreciate you doing this again.
Bryan, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.